What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Before we get into today's account, I need you to understand something. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This isn't speculation. This is a first-hand testimony from a former Marine who was assigned to protect someone he was never supposed to identify. What he witnessed during that assignment changed everything he believed about how the world actually works. If you're new here, this channel shares classified scientific and military accounts, stories that were never meant to reach the public. Real people, real operations, real consequences. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below if you've ever felt like the world is being run by people we never see. This one is different. This one kept me awake. Let's get into it. After what I witnessed during that assignment, I stopped believing we were in control. I'm recording this because I need someone to know. I don't expect you to believe me. I didn't believe it myself until I watched every single event they discussed happen exactly as planned. 18 months, every crisis, every shift, every headline. If this account disappears, you'll know why. But before it does, I need to tell you what I saw. I spent 12 years in the Marine Corps. Force Recon. 3 deployments, 2 in Afghanistan, 1 in an undisclosed location I still can't talk about. I know how to follow orders. I know how to keep my mouth shut. I know how to read a room and assess a threat before anyone else notices there is one. When I left the service in 2019, I went into private security, executive protection, high net worth individuals, politicians, CEOs, standard work, good pay, no surprises. Then I got the call. It came through a contractor I'd worked with before. Trusted guy, former agency. He didn't say which one, but you could tell. He said he had a job for me. Long-term assignment. Virginia. Principal required full-time security. 6-figure salary. But there was a condition. No background check on the client. No questions about identity. No documentation beyond the contract. I'd be referred to him only as the principal. He'd be referred to me only as security. I asked him what the threat profile was. He paused for a long time. Then he said, "There isn't one. You're there to observe protocols and maintain perimeter integrity. That's it." I told him that didn't make sense. If there's no threat, why the security? He said, "Because someone decided there should be." That was the whole explanation. I should have walked away right there. But the money was good, and I was bored, so I said yes. I arrived at the property on a Monday in early March. It was outside Middleburg, Virginia. Horse country, old money. The estate sat on about 40 acres. Main house was colonial style. Brick, tall windows, nothing flashy. There was a separate guest house, a 4-car garage, and a security outbuilding that I'd be working from. The whole property was surrounded by trees. You couldn't see it from the road. That detail stuck with me. I met the principal that first afternoon. He was in his late 60s, trim, gray hair, expensive suit but nothing flashy. No logos, no watch. He shook my hand and looked me in the eye for exactly 3 seconds. Then he said, "You'll receive your daily briefings at 600. You won't ask questions. You won't deviate from posted schedules. You'll observe and report anomalies only. Understood?" I said, "Yes, sir." He nodded and walked away. That was the entire introduction. The security outbuilding had everything I needed. Monitors for the perimeter cameras, encrypted comms, a bed, a kitchenette. I did a full sweep of the property that first night. Motion sensors every 20 meters. Infrared coverage on all approach roads. Hardened locks on every entry point. This wasn't corporate security. This was something else. I logged it. Didn't mention it. Just noted it in my head. The principal kept a strict routine. He woke at 05:30 every day. Breakfast at 06:15. He read physical newspapers, 3 of them. The Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the Washington Post. He took notes in a leather journal. I never saw him use a phone during breakfast. After that, he'd spend the morning in his office, lunch at 1300, afternoon walk around the property at 1500, dinner at 1900. By 2100, he was always in his study. That study was off limits, soundproofed, reinforced door, biometric lock. I was told during my briefing that under no circumstances was I to enter that room unless there was an imminent life-threatening emergency. No maintenance, no cleaning staff, nothing. He went in alone. I didn't know what he did in there. Not yet. The first week was uneventful. I did perimeter checks, monitored feeds, logged shift reports. The principal barely acknowledged me. We'd cross paths maybe twice a day. He'd nod. I'd nod. That was it. I started wondering if this was just a paranoid rich guy who wanted someone around to feel safe. Happens more than you'd think. But the equipment didn't match that profile. The protocols didn't match. Something was off. On day 8, I was running a system diagnostic in the security outbuilding when I noticed something in the network logs. There was encrypted traffic leaving the property every Tuesday at 2100 hours. High bandwidth, routed through 3 VPN layers and a relay I didn't recognize. It wasn't commercial. It wasn't government. It was something else. I flagged it internally but didn't report it. I wanted to see if it happened again. It did. The next Tuesday. Same time, same routing. I pulled the metadata. The session lasted exactly 90 minutes. No deviation. I checked the previous month's logs. Same pattern, every single Tuesday. Whatever was happening in that study at 2100 on Tuesdays was the reason I was here. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew it mattered. The Tuesday sessions became the center of my attention. I didn't have access to the study. I didn't have clearance to monitor the content, but I had the metadata. And metadata tells you more than people think. The sessions were always exactly 90 minutes. Never 89, never 91. Exactly 90. That's not natural. That's scheduled. That's protocol. I started positioning myself near the study on Tuesday nights. Not close enough to be obvious. Just within visual range. The principal would enter at 20:55, 5 minutes early. Every time. He'd lock the door behind him. At 2100, I'd see the status light on my monitor shift to active. Encrypted session initiated. At 22:30, the light would go dark. Session terminated. At 22:35, the principal would exit. He'd walk directly to his bedroom. No detours, no variation. One night I watched him exit and I saw his face. He looked tired, not physically, mentally, like he'd just sat through something that required total concentration. I'd seen that look before, in briefing rooms, after long tactical planning sessions. It's the look of someone who just made decisions that matter. Big decisions. I logged the observation. Didn't know what to do with it. I started reviewing personnel records. The contractor had given me limited access to the household staff. There was a housekeeper who came Mondays and Thursdays, a groundskeeper twice a week, a private chef 3 days a week. All of them had clearances. All of them had NDAs. None of them were allowed in the house during Tuesday evenings. That was explicit in their contracts. I checked. The property had to be empty except for me and the principal. That was required. On the 4th Tuesday, I tested something. I triggered a false perimeter alert at 21:15. Nothing serious. Just enough to require a status check. I called the principal's phone. No answer. I waited 5 minutes and called again. No answer. I reset the alert and logged it as a sensor malfunction. The next morning, the principal called me into his office. He asked if there had been an issue the night before. I explained the alert. He stared at me for a long time. Then he said, "In the future, unless there is an active breach, you will not contact me between 2100 and 22:30 on Tuesdays. Understood?" I said, "Yes, sir." He dismissed me. That was confirmation. Whatever happened in that room was untouchable. I started thinking about what kind of communication required that level of security. Government? Maybe. But I'd worked government contracts. This didn't feel like that. This felt private. Corporate? Possible. But no corporation I knew operated with this level of compartmentalization. I'd seen classified military ops with less restrictive protocols. So what was it? Then I noticed something else. The principal received deliveries every Friday. Small packages. Always from the same courier service. I ran the company. It was a shell. Registered in Delaware. No public records, no website. I checked the courier. Different person every time. Always paid in cash. The packages were never opened in front of anyone. He'd take them directly to the study. I never saw them again. I started paying attention to his reading material. He subscribed to journals I'd never heard of. Foreign policy, economic forecasting, geopolitical risk analysis. But these weren't mainstream publications. These were academic, niche. Some of them weren't even in English. He'd read them cover to cover. Take notes. Then shred the pages, not throw them away. Shred them. Every single page. One afternoon, I was running a perimeter check and I saw him on the phone in the garden. He was speaking quietly. I couldn't hear most of it, but I heard him say, "Confirmed for the second quarter. Implementation is on schedule." Then he saw me. He ended the call immediately, walked back inside, didn't say anything, but I felt it. He knew I'd heard, and he didn't like it. That night, my clearance level changed. I got an email from the contractor. No explanation, just an updated access code and a note that said, "Revised protocols attached." I opened the attachment. My perimeter access was expanded. I now had authorization to monitor internal security feeds in the main house, not the study, but everywhere else. Hallways, kitchen, living room, entry points. Why would he give me more access after I'd overheard something? That didn't make sense, unless he wanted me to see something. I pulled up the new feeds. For 3 days, nothing unusual. Then on Monday, I saw it. The principal had left a folder on his desk. In clear view of the camera, it was open. I zoomed in. The page showed a graph. Economic projections, dated 3 months in the future. The title read, "Coordinated Market Correction, Phase 2 Implementation." I stared at that screen for 20 minutes. He'd left that there on purpose. He wanted me to see it. This wasn't a mistake. This was a test. The folder stayed on the desk for 2 days. I checked the feed every hour. It didn't move. The principal walked past it a dozen times, never touched it, never acknowledged it, just left it there, open, visible. I started wondering if I was supposed to do something, report it, ignore it. I didn't know the right move, so I did nothing, just watched. On Wednesday, the folder was gone. I checked the logs. The principal had entered the office at 8:20 and removed it. No one else had been in the room. I felt like I'd passed something, or failed something. I couldn't tell which, but the fact that he'd left it there in the first place meant something. He was showing me pieces, controlled pieces, like breadcrumbs. I just didn't know where they led yet. That Friday, another package arrived. Same courier service, same routine. But this time, the principal opened it in the hallway. He didn't go to the study. He opened it right there, and he did it while I was doing a walkthrough. He wanted me nearby. Inside was a USB drive and a printed document, maybe 30 pages, bound, no cover. He flipped through it, then he looked up at me, made direct eye contact, and said, "Secure perimeter tonight, no exceptions." Then he walked away. I ran a full diagnostic on every sensor, checked every camera, ran counter-surveillance sweeps. Everything was clean, but I stayed on high alert. Something was happening. At 1900, a car pulled up to the gate, black sedan, no plates. I'd never seen it before. I called the principal. He said, "Expected. Allow entry." I opened the gate. The car pulled up to the main house. A man stepped out, mid-70s, gray suit, thin. He didn't look around, didn't acknowledge me, just walked to the door. The principal let him in. They went to the study. I monitored the external feeds. The car stayed in the driveway. No driver. Just parked. I checked the plates again. Nothing. Not even a temporary registration. This was off book. I logged the arrival time. 1908 hours. The study light went active at 1912. I watched the metadata. Encrypted session initiated. But this one was different. The bandwidth was lower. This wasn't a video conference. This was local. Just the two of them. The session lasted 42 minutes. At 1954, the guest exited. He walked to the car, got in, drove away. I logged the departure. I waited for the principal to say something. He didn't. The next morning, I checked the internal feeds. The study had been cleaned. Completely. Not by the housekeeper. By him. Every surface wiped. Trash removed. It was like the meeting never happened. That Tuesday, the regular session happened as scheduled. 2100 hours. 90 minutes. But this time, something went wrong. At 2140, I got an alert. Audio malfunction in the study's external feed. Not the encrypted line, the backup system. It was a redundancy I didn't even know existed. The system had switched to an auxiliary channel for 30 seconds, and during those 30 seconds, the soundproofing failed. I heard voices, multiple voices. I couldn't make out faces, but I heard words. The principal said, "Timeline adjustment confirmed for Q2. Are we aligned on implementation?" Another voice, older, raspy, said, "Aligned. Media coordination is in place. We proceed as scheduled. A third voice, flat, almost mechanical, said, "Market correction will begin on the 15th. Managed decline, 18% over 6 weeks." Then the feed cut. Soundproofing restored. Session continued. I sat there staring at the monitor. My hands were shaking. I didn't log it. I should have. That was protocol. But I didn't, because I didn't know what I'd just heard. They were talking about the future, not predicting it, planning it. Market corrections, media coordination, timeline adjustments. These weren't analysts. These were people making decisions. And those decisions hadn't happened yet. I checked the date. April 16th. Q2 started in 2 weeks. I wrote down everything I'd heard, word for word. Then I locked it in my personal safe. The next morning, the principal called me into his office. He didn't sit, just stood by the window. He said, "There was a technical issue last night. You're aware?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "What did you hear?" I could have lied. I thought about it. But something told me that was the wrong move. So I told him, "Market correction, media coordination, Q2 timeline." He listened, didn't react. Then he said, "Your clearance level has been elevated again. You'll receive new protocols by end of day." That was it. He dismissed me. I went back to the security outbuilding and pulled up my access. It had already changed. I now had internal audio access to the main house, not the study, but everywhere else. I also had access to a shared drive I'd never seen before. It was labeled context files. I opened it. Inside were folders, dozens of them, each one labeled with a date range. I opened the most recent one. It contained reports, geopolitical analysis, economic forecasting, policy predictions. All of them dated weeks or months in the future, and all of them written like they'd already happened. I spent the next 3 days reading those files. I didn't sleep much. Couldn't. Every document I opened made less sense than the last. Or maybe it made too much sense. There were reports on currency fluctuations that hadn't occurred yet, analysis of political appointments that hadn't been announced, risk assessments for conflicts that hadn't started, and every single one was written in past tense, like they were reviewing something that had already been executed. One file caught my attention. It was titled Energy Sector Adjustment, Q3 Implementation. The document outlined a plan for a controlled energy crisis, not a natural one, a managed one. It described supply restrictions, coordinated refinery shutdowns, strategic reserve drawdowns delayed by bureaucratic channels. The goal was a 38% price increase over 12 weeks. The document listed expected public response, expected media narratives, expected legislative reactions. All of it was mapped out like a training exercise. At the bottom of the document, there was a signature block. No name, just a number. 3. That was the principal. And below that, 6 more numbers, 1 through 7, except 3. This wasn't a report he'd received. This was a report he'd co-signed. He was part of the group that wrote it. I checked the date on the file. It was created 4 months ago. The implementation start date listed was July 9th. That was 11 weeks away. I opened another folder. This one was labeled Governance Transitions, Southern Hemisphere. Inside were dossiers on 3 countries, leadership profiles, economic vulnerabilities, social pressure points. Each dossier had a section called Transition Pathway. It described how to destabilize the current government, who to fund, who to discredit, what narratives to amplify. The timelines ranged from 8 months to 2 years. At the end of each dossier was a final section, Post-Transition Administration. It listed the replacement leaders, by name, people who weren't in power yet, people who weren't even in politics yet. I checked the metadata on the files. They were updated every 2 weeks. The last update was 6 days ago. I looked at the change log, small adjustments, timeline shifts, resource reallocation. These weren't theoretical documents. These were active project files. Someone was executing this, and they were updating progress in real time. I felt sick. I closed the laptop, walked outside, tried to breathe. That night I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd spent 12 years in the Marines. I'd seen classified operations. I'd seen contingency plans for worst-case scenarios. But this was different. This wasn't defense. This wasn't response. This was orchestration. These people weren't reacting to the world. They were writing it, and the principal was one of them. I started wondering who the other 6 were, and how long this had been happening. The next morning, the principal left another folder on his desk. I saw it on the internal camera. This one was labeled Implementation Standards, Consensus Protocol. I zoomed in. The first page was a flowchart. It showed a decision-making structure. 7 nodes, each one connected to the others. Decisions required majority consensus, 4 out of 7. But certain decisions required unanimity. The document listed examples, governance transitions, major economic corrections, infrastructure failures. Anything that could cause mass casualties required all 7 to agree. I kept reading. The document described how they communicated. Weekly video sessions, quarterly in-person meetings, emergency protocols for off-cycle decisions. It described how they maintained operational security, compartmentalized information, need-to-know access, rotating cover identities. None of them used their real names in any documentation, just numbers, 1 through 7. I still didn't know who they were, but I knew what they were. They were a council, and they were running something big. The folder stayed on the desk for 6 hours. Then the principal walked in and saw me on the camera. He looked directly at the lens, smiled, and closed the folder. That smile told me everything. He wasn't making mistakes. He wasn't being careless. He was showing me on purpose. He wanted me to know, and I didn't understand why. Not yet. That Friday, I got a message from the contractor. It said, "Principal has requested your presence at an upcoming event. Details to follow. Maintain current protocols." I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it wasn't standard. Security doesn't attend events. Security secures events. This was something else. I replied, asking for clarification. The contractor responded, "You'll be briefed on site. No further information available." That was it. On Monday, the principal called me into his office. He told me to sit. That had never happened before. He sat across from me and said, "You've been given access to certain materials. You've handled that appropriately. In 2 weeks, there will be a meeting here. All 7 members of the council will be present. You'll provide security for the duration. 3 days. You'll see things. You'll hear things. And when it's over, you'll make a choice." I asked what choice. He said, "Whether you want to understand what you've seen, or whether you want to leave and forget it." Then he stood up and left. I sat there for 10 minutes, trying to process what he'd just said. I had 2 weeks to prepare, and no idea what I was preparing for. The preparation started immediately. I received a file from the contractor, 23 pages, security protocols for the event, perimeter expansion, counter-surveillance measures, communications blackout procedures, no phones, no internet, no external contact for 72 hours. The property would be completely isolated. I'd have support staff, 4 additional security personnel, all of them vetted through channels I didn't recognize. None of them would know what the meeting was about. Only I would, because I'd already seen the files. The support team arrived 3 days before the event. Former military. All of them. We didn't exchange details, just call signs. I was primary. They were 1 through 4. We ran drills, perimeter coverage, intrusion response, medical emergencies. Everything was rehearsed, but none of them asked why we were doing this. They'd been told not to, and they followed orders. I respected that, but it also told me they were used to working jobs where questions weren't welcome. On day 2 of prep, we installed additional equipment, signal jammers, upgraded cameras, thermal imaging on all approach vectors. We set up a mobile command post in the security outbuilding, redundant power, satellite uplink for emergency use only. The principal watched some of the setup from his office window. He didn't interfere, didn't comment, just observed. I caught him looking at me once. He nodded, like he was approving something. I didn't nod back. The guests started arriving on the morning of the meeting. First car showed up at 847. Black SUV, no plates. Driver stayed with the vehicle. A man stepped out. Late 60s, bald, glasses, expensive suit. He didn't look around, just walked to the door. The principal greeted him personally. They shook hands. No words. The man went inside. I logged the arrival, designated him as guest 1. The driver parked the SUV in the garage and waited. Second arrival at 9:02. Different vehicle, same profile. This one was a woman, early 70s, gray hair pulled back, sharp features. She carried a leather briefcase. The principal greeted her the same way. Handshake. No words. She went inside. I logged her as guest 2. The pattern continued. By 10:20, all 6 guests had arrived. Men and women. Ages ranging from mid-60s to late 70s. None of them looked like anything special. They looked like professors, executives, retirees. But I knew better. At 1100, they all gathered in the dining room. I monitored the internal feed. They sat around a large table. The principal sat at the head. No one spoke. A staff member brought water. No food. Just water. They waited until the staff left. Then the principal stood. He said, "We have 16 hours. Let's begin." Then he gestured to someone off camera. The feed cut. I'd lost visual. That was expected. The study wasn't the only secure room anymore. They'd converted the entire east wing. I wouldn't see anything else until they were done. For the next 16 hours, I had nothing. No audio, no visual, just perimeter monitoring. The support team rotated shifts. I stayed awake. I didn't want to miss anything. At 03:20, the door to the east wing opened. They filed out one by one, slow, tired. They looked like they'd just finished something exhausting. One of them, an older man with white hair, stopped in the hallway. He leaned against the wall, closed his eyes, took 3 deep breaths, then kept walking. I'd never seen someone look that drained from a conversation. They went to their rooms, separate quarters. The principal had prepared 6 guest suites, all of them soundproofed, all of them secured. I ran a thermal scan. Each room showed 1 occupant, all of them stationary, sleeping, or trying to. I checked the metadata logs. No outbound communications, no attempts to access external networks. They were following protocol. Whatever they'd just discussed stayed in that room, and it would stay there until they decided otherwise. At 0900, they reconvened. Same room, same setup. This session lasted 12 hours. When they emerged, they looked different. Not tired, focused, like they'd moved past discussion and into decision. I saw one of them, the woman I'd logged as guest 2, smile. Not a friendly smile, a satisfied smile, like she'd just won something. That image stuck with me. I didn't like it. On the 3rd day, they met for 6 hours. Shorter session, more efficient. When they finished, they gathered in the main sitting room. Informal, no table, just chairs arranged in a circle. They spoke quietly. I couldn't hear anything, but I could see body language, agreement, confirmation. One of them pulled out a folder, passed it around. Each person reviewed it, signed it, passed it on. When it came back to the principal, he placed it in a leather case, locked it. That was the end. They left one by one over the next 3 hours, same as they'd arrived. Different vehicles, different drivers, no conversation, just handshakes and departures. By 1800, the property was empty except for me, the principal, and the support team. I dismissed the support team, paid them in cash. They left without questions. Then it was just me and him. I went to the security outbuilding. He went to his study. I waited. I knew he'd call me soon, and I was right. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Come to my office." I walked to the main house. The sun was setting. The property felt different, quieter, like something had shifted. I knocked on the office door. The principal told me to come in. He was sitting at his desk. The leather case was in front of him. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat. He didn't say anything for a long time, just looked at me. Then he slid the case across the desk and said, "Open it." I hesitated. He nodded. I opened the case. Inside was the folder they'd all signed. I pulled it out. The first page was a cover sheet. It read, "Operational Summary, Q3, Q4 Implementation Schedule." Below that were 7 signatures, not names, just numbers, 1 through 7. I turned the page. What I saw made my stomach drop. It was a timeline, 18 months, divided into phases. Each phase had objectives, dates, responsible parties, expected outcomes. Phase 1 was labeled Energy Sector Destabilization. Start date, July 9th. The same date I'd seen in the files weeks ago. The objective was to create a controlled supply crisis, refinery incidents, pipeline delays, strategic reserve access restrictions. The expected outcome was a 40% price increase over 14 weeks. The document listed secondary effects, public unrest, political pressure, policy shifts. It described how media coverage would be managed, which narratives to amplify, which experts to platform. It was all mapped out. Phase 2 was currency volatility, emerging markets, 3 countries targeted, timeline, September through November. The objective was to trigger capital flight, destabilize local currencies, force IMF intervention. The document described the mechanisms, coordinated sell-offs, algorithmic trading patterns, planted economic analysis in key publications. It listed the expected outcome, regime pressure, governance transitions within 12 months, and it named the replacements, people who weren't in power yet, but would be. Phase 3 was labeled Infrastructure Cascade, Northeastern Corridor. This one made me feel cold. The objective was to create a cascading failure in the regional power grid, not through sabotage, through systemic stress, deferred maintenance, delayed upgrades, coordinated peak demand events. The document described it as a managed collapse. Expected duration, 4 to 6 days. Expected casualties, minimal. Expected outcome, emergency federal intervention, new regulatory framework, centralized grid management. It was all planned, every detail. I kept reading. There were 12 phases total, each one building on the last, each one creating conditions for the next. By the end of the 18 months, the document projected 3 governance transitions, 2 new international agreements, 1 major policy shift in the U.S., and a 15% redistribution of global economic influence toward centralized management structures. It read like a script, and these 7 people were the directors. I looked up at the principal. He was watching me. I said, "This is real." He said, "Yes." I said, "You're going to do this." He said, "We already are. Phase 1 starts in 11 days. I felt like the room was spinning. I said, "How long has this been happening?" He leaned back in his chair, thought about it, then said, "In its current form, 40 years. Before that, longer. Different structures, different people, same principle. The world doesn't run itself. Someone has to guide it." I asked him who they were. He said, "We're not politicians. We're not elected. We're not public. We're the people who make sure things happen the way they need to happen. Governments are tools. Markets are tools. Media is a tool. We use them to create stability, to prevent chaos, to manage transitions that would otherwise tear societies apart. You think the world is random. It's not. It's managed. And we're the ones managing it." I asked him how they chose what to do. He said, "Consensus. We meet quarterly. We review global conditions. We identify pressure points. We propose interventions. If 4 of us agree, we move forward. If all 7 agree, we move immediately. The system works because we're patient. We think in decades, not election cycles, not fiscal quarters. We think in generational shifts, and we make sure those shifts happen smoothly." I asked him what happened to people who found out. He said, "Most don't. The few who do either join us or they leave. We don't eliminate problems. We don't threaten. We offer a choice, understanding or ignorance. Both are acceptable. But once you choose understanding, you can't go back. You'll see the patterns everywhere. You'll know when something is natural and when it's us, and you'll have to decide if you can live with that." Then he slid a second folder across the desk. He said, "This is your choice. Inside is an offer, a position, full access, full compensation. You'd work directly with me. You'd coordinate security for all council operations. You'd see everything. You'd be part of it. Or you can walk away tonight. I'll pay you for your time. You'll sign an NDA, and you'll never hear from us again. You have 48 hours to decide." I stared at the folder. I didn't open it. I just stared. He stood up. He said, "I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is wrong. You're thinking someone should stop this. But ask yourself, who? Governments? We built most of them. Media? We fund it. The public? They don't want to know. They want to believe the world makes sense, and we make sure it does. We're not the villains. We're the architects, and the world runs better because of us." Then he left. I sat there alone, holding a folder I hadn't opened, in a room that suddenly felt too small. I didn't sleep that night. I went back to the security outbuilding and sat in the dark. The folder was on the desk in front of me. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. Money, access, power. A chance to be on the inside of something most people would never believe existed. And all I had to do was say yes. All I had to do was accept that the world I thought I lived in wasn't real. I kept thinking about the documents, the timelines, the phases. 18 months of orchestrated events. People would lose jobs, savings, homes. Some would die. Not many, but some. And it was all planned, calculated, managed. They called it stability. They called it guidance. But it was control, total control. And they didn't see anything wrong with it. To them, this was necessary. To them, this was service. I thought about the principal's words. The world doesn't run itself. Someone has to guide it. Maybe he was right. Maybe the world was too complex, too fragile, too chaotic to be left alone. Maybe it needed people like them, people who could see the big picture, people who could make the hard decisions, people who weren't bound by elections or public opinion or morality. Maybe that's what it took to keep civilization from collapsing. Or maybe that was just what they told themselves so they could sleep at night. I pulled up the files again. I went back through the phases. I looked at the dates, the targets, the expected outcomes. Everything was so precise, so confident, like they'd done this 100 times before. And they probably had. 40 years. That's what he'd said. 40 years of this. How many crises had they engineered? How many wars had they nudged into existence? How many leaders had they installed or removed? How much of history was theirs? I thought about walking away, just packing my stuff and leaving, signing the NDA, taking the money, forgetting everything I'd seen. But I knew I couldn't. Once you see something like this, you can't unsee it. Once you know the world is managed, you can't go back to believing it's random. Every headline would be a question. Every crisis would be suspect. Every political shift would feel manufactured. I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what was real and what was them. And if I stayed, if I opened that folder and said yes, then I'd be part of it. I'd be complicit. I'd help them do it. I'd coordinate their security. I'd protect their meetings. I'd make sure their plans went smoothly. And I'd know every time someone lost everything because of a policy shift they engineered. I'd know every time a government fell because they decided it should. I'd carry that, forever. I kept thinking about the people who'd be affected, the ones who'd lose their jobs in Phase 1, the families in the 3 countries targeted in Phase 2, the people in the northeastern corridor who'd sit in the dark for 6 days during Phase 3. They wouldn't know. They'd think it was bad luck, bad timing, natural consequences of a complex system. They'd never know someone planned it. Someone decided their suffering was acceptable. Someone signed off on it. But would stopping it change anything? If I refused the offer and walked away, the plan would still happen. The council would still meet. The phases would still roll out. I'd just be watching from the outside, powerless, knowing what was coming and unable to do anything about it. Or worse, if I tried to expose it, who would believe me? I had no proof, just documents I wasn't supposed to have, and an NDA I'd be violating. They'd bury me, legally, financially, maybe worse. The principal had said they didn't eliminate problems, but I didn't know if I believed that. I'd seen what they were capable of. I'd seen how far their reach went. If I became a problem, would they really just let me walk away? Or was that part of the test? Say no and see what happens. Maybe the NDA was a formality. Maybe the real insurance was something else. Fear, isolation, the knowledge that no one would believe me anyway. I thought about my time in the Marines. I'd followed orders. I'd done things I wasn't proud of. But I always believed there was a reason, a mission, a purpose. Even when it was ugly, I thought it mattered. But this wasn't defense. This wasn't protection. This was manipulation. This was playing God with people's lives. And they didn't even see it as wrong. They saw it as duty. That's what scared me most. They believed they were right. By morning, I still hadn't decided. I made coffee, watched the sun come up. The property looked peaceful, beautiful even, like nothing had happened here. Like 7 people hadn't just spent 3 days deciding how to reshape the world. I thought about the principal. He wasn't evil. He wasn't a monster. He was calm, rational, intelligent, and that made it worse. Because if someone like him could justify this, then maybe anyone could. Maybe that's how it always worked. Smart people convincing themselves that control was compassion. I made my decision that afternoon. I walked to the main house. The principal was in his study. I knocked. He told me to come in. I sat down. I slid the folder back across the desk. unopened. I said, "I can't do this." He didn't react, just nodded, like he'd expected it. He said, "You understand what you're walking away from?" I said, "Yes." He said, "And you understand you can't talk about what you've seen?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Then we're done here." He pulled out a standard separation agreement. I read it. It was clean. Payment for services rendered. Non-disclosure clause. Non-disparagement. Standard corporate language. Nothing threatening. Nothing sinister. I signed it. He signed it. He stood up, shook my hand, and said, "You're a good man. I hope you stay that way." I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. I left that night, packed my gear, drove away. Didn't look back. 3 weeks later, it started. July 9th, energy crisis. Refinery fire in Texas. Pipeline delay in Louisiana. Strategic reserve release blocked by regulatory review. Gas prices spiked, 42% in 10 days. The news called it a perfect storm. Supply chain issues, geopolitical tensions, market volatility, all the usual explanations. But I knew it was them. I watched it happen exactly like the document said it would. Phase 1, right on schedule. 6 weeks later, currency collapse in 2 countries. Not 3, 2. I guess they adjusted. Capital flight, IMF intervention, government instability. The news talked about corruption, mismanagement, economic fundamentals. But I saw the pattern. I saw the coordination. Sell-offs happening simultaneously across markets. Media narratives emerging in sync. It was textbook, and no one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say anything. 4 months in, the grid failure. Northeastern corridor. November. Right when they said, cascading blackout. 4 days. Millions without power. The news blamed aging infrastructure, deferred maintenance, increased demand. The government promised reforms, new regulatory frameworks, centralized management. Exactly what the document predicted. I watched the press conferences. I saw the policy proposals. Word for word, it was all scripted, and everyone bought it. By month 12, I'd stopped watching the news. I couldn't. Every headline felt like a countdown. Every crisis felt like a checklist item. I knew what was coming next, and I was right. Every time. Governance transition in South America, trade agreement in Southeast Asia, political scandal in Europe. All of it happened. All of it aligned with the timeline. 18 months of orchestrated chaos. And the world just absorbed it, adapted, moved on. I tried telling people, not many, just a few. People I trusted, former military, journalists I'd worked with. No one believed me. They thought I was paranoid, conspiracy-minded. One guy laughed and said, "You think 7 people control the world? Come on." I showed him the patterns, the dates, the correlations. He said it was confirmation bias, that I was seeing connections that weren't there. Maybe he was right, or maybe he just couldn't handle the alternative. I thought about going public, writing it down, posting it somewhere. But what would that do? I had no proof. The documents were gone. The NDAs were signed. And even if I had proof, would it matter? People don't want to believe the world is managed. They want to believe in randomness, in free will, in the idea that their choices matter. Telling them the truth wouldn't liberate them. It would just make them feel powerless. Maybe the principal was right. Maybe ignorance is better. I moved twice in the first year, just to feel like I was doing something. Changed my number, kept a low profile. I don't think they're watching me. I don't think they care. I made my choice. I walked away. As far as they're concerned, I'm irrelevant. Just another person who saw something they shouldn't have and couldn't do anything about it. And they're right. I can't. I'm just one guy, and they're a council, with 40 years of practice, and resources I can't even imagine. Sometimes I see the principal on TV. Not often, but occasionally. He's at a summit, or a fundraiser, or a university lecture. Always in the background. Never center stage. Just another face in the crowd. But I recognize him. And I swear every time he looks directly at the camera, like he knows I'm watching, like he's reminding me, you could have been part of this. You chose to walk away. Now you get to watch. The 18 months ended 3 weeks ago. Everything on that timeline happened. Every single phase. I kept a journal. Tracked it all. Just so I'd know I wasn't crazy. And I'm not. It was real. It is real. They're still out there. Still meeting. Still planning. The next 18 months. The next 40 years. They'll keep going, and the world will keep turning, and no one will know, except me. And I have to live with that. I have to live with knowing the world is managed, and I can't do anything about it. That's the price of walking away. Not punishment, just knowledge, and the weight of carrying it alone. If you're still listening, thank you. I know how this sounds. I know what you're thinking, but I'm telling you the truth. I saw it, I lived it, and I walked away. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe I should have stayed and tried to change it from the inside. Or maybe I should have burned it all down. I don't know. I just know I couldn't be part of it. And now I have to watch it happen, over and over, for the rest of my life. If this recording disappears, you'll know they found it. If I disappear, you'll know why. But I had to say it. Someone had to know, even if no one believes me. Even if it doesn't change anything, at least it's out there. At least someone heard it. Good luck, and pay attention, because they're still working, and the next phase is already in motion.